Hello, everyone. This is your host, Manoj Tandon. Welcome to another episode of Dark Rhino Security Confidential. Today, we have another awesome guest joining us. We're honored to have James Potter join us. James has been in the business for over 25 years. He's an Active Directory veteran with that much experience and computer experience for much longer than that. We'll let him tell us about that here in a second. He has worked at prestigious firms like Ernst & Young and PricewaterhouseCoopers, and then went on to form his own company, DSE, in 2019. And he's a car aficionado, resides in the Pacific Northwest, and is a complete expert on all things AD. And we're eager to get his advice. So, James, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Yeah, not a problem. I was looking forward to introing myself, but I think you did a pretty good job of it.
So, give us a little bit about your background. The intro only give us a little bit. How, you've been in this business forever. You predate Active Directory. So tell us about how life got started in computer land, if you will.
Yeah, sure. So, I grew up in Detroit. I always thought computers were really interesting, right? I mean, there was an Atari in my life at one point, and that was just like, this thing is the coolest thing ever. I can't imagine anything even cooler than a Atari. And a little bit later on, my family actually got an Amiga 2000, which was
I
just,
remember
it
those.
blew all of my friends' computers out of the water, right? Like compared to their Ataris or NESs, it was just state of the art, and it was just so fascinating. And I wanted to learn everything there was to learn about this thing. It's just this amazing tool, not just for gaming, but for anything else you could want to do. Like you could spreadsheet on that. It had a full GUI. It was really, really fascinating.
Now, that was like the early 80s, or right? Or mid 80s.
The Amiga came out like mid late 80s. They had a few different variants running around
Yeah.
out there. The 2000 was late 80s if memory serves. But that was
That's
a great system. Even had a hard drive, not a tape drive. It had a gosh, how big was this hard drive? It was in megabytes. It was so small.
Yeah, but back then that would have been considered big, right? I mean,
Yeah, it
5
was it
meg.
was it was a big deal. My stepfather had purchased it to because all of his brothers had computers, and he picked it up, and I don't think he really knew what to do with it, so it just kind of sat there, and then I got to play with it.
So did you go into mainframe systems, or?
No, so for me, kind of cutting my teeth on all this tech in the 80s and early 90s, I was still going to public school, but I ended up dropping out fairly early. I think I made it to like 10th grade. The public school system just really wasn't for me. I was learning better on my own than I was through the school system. So at that
Yep.
point, I started looking at certifications and what can I do in this industry to get exposed and get that first foot in the door, which is tough. Like late 90s was not the best time to get into tech, like 99, 2000. And then we had that huge bust in 2000 and
Yeah,
2001, and
dot-com bust. Yep.
yeah, that was a rough period of time. But what I had done is after I dropped out of high school, I started working at U of M, their computer lab. Replacing floppy drives and 50-pound CRT monitors, and helping students with Word and how to transfer data from floppy drives to zip drives and stuff like that. But it was a foot in the door for like the hardware side, the help desk. And I personally think that's something I love to see on a resume, because when I see someone that has like at least a couple years of help desk, I know they've been through it, right? Because that's when you learn empathy and you learn humanity working help desk. And I think that's a really
Or you come out a very mad person. You know,
yeah. You figure out after a year or two of help desk if it's something you want to do the rest of your life.
that's right.
No, I mean, well, when I was at U of M, they were still using NetWare, right? Because this is like pre Windows
Oh,
2000 kind of
wow.
stuff. And my first exposure to Active Directory would have been right when it came out in 2000, because we'd done the NT40 and the NetWare systems and had that visibility, and it was clumsy. It was like the best thing that was out at the time, but it was just very hard to maintain at scale. And AD came out, and it's like, holy smokes, we can replicate all
Now,
of our users. We don't have a limit of like, 500 users per domain controller. This is amazing. We could have 100,000 users. This is going to scale infinitely. And I saw that, I was like, man, all the large companies, they have to do this. There's no way not to do this. There's no competitor.
so was back then, I'm trying to remember, NT40 didn't have AD. Was it like JetBlue or Blue? I forget the name of there was a
Jet.
old
So
data.
yeah, so
Yeah,
actually modern Active Directory is still based on a Jet database methodology that was
really?
developed in the early 90s, around 92 or so. So at its core, like Active Directory is just a replicated database based on Jet of all things, which is almost 30 years old, over 30 years old now. Wow. So it was the first big replicatable database that was deployed at scale for enterprises. And it was a big deal. It really was, because before you had to have these NT40 DCs with a primary DC and a backup DC. And if you had over a certain number of users, you had to create more of these and more of these and more of these. And if a user moved from site A to site B, their user count didn't exist there. So there's all sorts of add-on technology that you had to duct tape and stick on top of it. And it was just very, very clumsy. But the first Windows 2000 Active Directory server kind of changed everything. It was a big deal, and it's still leveraged by the vast majority of Fortune 500s around the world today.
Has its organization or security changed since
Oh,
Windows 2000?
oh my gosh, yes, so much. There's been so many changes in the past, 20 years. So we'll go to the very, very first one. So now back in the early 2000s, Microsoft would recommend an empty administrative domain and then a child domain, right? So you put all of your production stuff in the child and all of your high security stuff in the parent. And they had to stop telling everyone to do that because it's not a security boundary, right? The parent-child relationship is not inherently secure. Forests are security boundaries, but domain child and parent domain trusts are not security boundaries. So what you see in a lot of these older companies that adopted AD right back in the 2000 days is they all have this empty root for basically no reason because Microsoft told everybody to do it, right? And there's lots of examples of that over the course of time. And then security's gotten just so much better for Active Directory, but the downside is Microsoft doesn't force those changes because they don't want to break somebody's production. So Microsoft comes out with all these new security methodologies and baselines, and they're there in the operating system. You can flip them on, but more often than not, they're not flipped on by default. Again, because backwards compatibility, and that's the big thing with Microsoft. Like if you could do it in Windows 2000, you can almost still do all of that now in the latest versions of the operating systems. All the
You know,
GUIs, command lines, everything's there.
you bring up a very interesting point here. Is that there's a notion that, especially with the cloud, that Microsoft's taking care of my security, and I don't have. There's this, especially in the um, executive circles, there's this notion that if we go to the cloud, Microsoft's taking care of it. So if you go to AD in the cloud, that's apparently there. But as you're rightfully describing, it doesn't matter if it's cloud or on-prem. I'm guessing you're going to have to do configuration changes. That's still
Yeah.
left.
Yeah, you still need the three tiers of security for at least larger organizations, and this is what DSE primarily works with is your Fortune 500s. So in our opinion, you need really three things to have a good security foundation. These are abstract concepts,
Okay.
but ones that I think are very applicable. One, you need a security architect for that specific tech, whether it's a network security architect, an identity security architect, a desktop security architect. It doesn't matter. Depending on your scale, you have a security architect for that specific technology. Let's talk about Active Directory here. So you need a
Okay.
good Active Directory security architect. You're going to have to spend money on this person. They aren't going to be cheap, but they need to be passionate, right? They need to care about what's going on at the business and
Okay.
kind of have a dog in the race, right? There should be some sort of like performance or compensation plan, like, hey, if we don't get hacked, you get this over this time period, some sort of golden handcuffs, right, to keep that motivation there. And
Okay.
two, you need at least a couple very good engineers to implement that architect's vision, right? They push out the security changes, they push out the policies, they make the architect's vision into reality in the enterprise. And then below them, a bunch of sysadmins that are able to turn wrenches, press buttons, and get the job done. You don't have to spend a ton of money on the admins, but you definitely spend on the engineers and the architect. And then third, you need auditors to come in and make sure those security controls are implemented, whether they're internal or external. It kind of depends on your org and what you do. But if you have those three things, you have security controls that are updated and pushed out in policy. You have them actually implemented in the organization, and then you have auditors checking to make sure those policies are there and they're functioning as expected. And that could be through auditing, red teaming, kind of very org dependent.
So, James, you've worked with lots of companies. How many actually have all three of these basic things?
Very, very few. Typically, you get 2 out of 3, right? You'll get, hey, we have great security architects, we have great engineers, but there's holes because no one's auditing it, right? And the thing about, users and admins is they find the path of least resistance. And the path of least resistance is not always the most secure path. So having the organization externally audited, or at least having some internal auditors or internal red teams kind of poke around and see if there's holes is really important, because that's what the threat actors are going to do, right? The bad guys are going to be running discovery tools to discover where your weaknesses are. And if you're 98% secured, they're going to find that 2%.
Yeah, well, that's how they make money.
Yeah, absolutely it is.
Right. So they're absolutely hell bent on doing that. And what, like, you're working at DSE, you guys are working with Fortune 500s, but what's an SMB to do? Because most of the time they got like 2 guys or maybe a guy or a part-time person that's, does their networking. It's like they're the jack of all trades, right? And cybersecurity means I've put like a phishing protection and endpoint tool or something like that on. And that's it for cyber, man.
Yeah, it's really, really tough for SMBs because they don't have a ton of extra money, don't have a ton of extra resources for headcount. So the people that you have, as we talked about, are typically generalists. And generalists can go off of, security baselines. So NIST inspires CIS to release their compliance standards, right? All of the CIS stuff is largely based on NIST, but this is compliance and not security. And there is a difference there. So compliance will help secure your org 100%, but mostly it's there to help you pass compliance tests. And the data tends to be rather old. It takes a long time for security control to get added to NIST and then added to CIS, and then trickle down into something that these admins can click a button and push out. So it's really tough there, but it's a good starting point, right? Getting everything like CIS level 2 compliant. If you're a smaller org, that's something you can look to. That's gonna help out a lot. That's fairly well documented that any jack of all trades could just pick up and go push out.
Do you think the situation would improve if the decision makers or the powers that be somehow better understood the risk, or it was articulated to them in a much better way? It just seems like cybersecurity risk is, even today, especially in SMB, is not grasped really well. They don't understand.
It's tough because a lot of SMBs assume they're not targets. Like, hey, we're only making 50 or 80 mil a year. Like, why would anyone care about us? Or we're only making 20 mil a year. We're small. Like, we're a rounding error. But when you're small, you're an easier target because you don't have that same kind of security presence that the larger organizations have. So you're the house on the block that has their back door unlocked. And that's the house that's going to get broken into because it's the easiest to get into. And because of that, we're seeing threat actors like Lockbit and Alfie hit a lot of smaller companies. And for many of them, it can be a death knell, right? If suddenly you can't do any accounts payable or accounts receivable because all of your accounting systems are ransomware and you don't have a backup that's not from 3 years ago, then you're dead in the water. It's literally put organizations out of business. A hospital went out of business because of this.
You know what the interesting stat on that is? That most SMBs 6 months post breach are typically out of business.
Yeah, it's bad. It can be extremely, extremely debilitating. And that kind of risk is hard for humans to like intrinsically place a value on. We're really bad at what if there's a big natural disaster? What if there's a flood or a hurricane or a war or some sort of global climate change? Like, what does that look like in dollars and cents? And we're not very good at that, right? We're very historically bad at it. Even insurance companies are bad at it. And this is something we're kind of seeing this space because it's hard for an SMB to justify spending on security because they can't quantify the risk appropriately. Because even spending money on someone to come in and quantify the risk is like, why, that's a lot of cash. Why would I spend like
That's a
a
lot of
half million
money.
dollars to like just know what my risk threshold is? Like, because that's a big chunk of change to a smaller organization. So it's really tough. So we see a lot of these SMBs turning to MSPs for their security, right? So they'll have one guy on staff that does tech, and then they'll outsource everything out to an MSP. And okay, the MSP is taking care of all of it. I don't need to worry about it. The MSP is doing it. But the MSPs themselves are also small businesses, right? They're also SMBs.
Right.
So they're cutting corners as well. They'll bring in one person or a small group of people and, they're juggling, 5, 10, 20 different clients simultaneously. So they're trying to go as fast as possible to make as much money as possible. So when that MSP gets popped, then all of their clients also get popped downstream. It's supply chain stuff like that is getting really nasty.
Which is why a lot of MSPs can't get cybersecurity insurance, but that's a separate topic
It's
altogether.
expensive. It's expensive.
It's expensive as heck for them, and for
It's
that exact reason, James, that you just pointed out.
Yeah, there's a
So,
lot of liability.
it? What would you say is the biggest, in your opinion, the biggest risks that the organizations face, large and small? What?
The biggest one is credential elevation, right? Because more often than not, a threat actor's entry point into an enterprise is workstations, desktops, laptops, that kind of stuff. And the first machine they pop normally doesn't have a ton of privileges on it, right? It has, Bob or Judy's account. They can email, they can, message people. Maybe they have access to some web front end, but it's not domain admin permissions. And through really common misconfigurations, whether SMB or enterprise, there could be service accounts kicking off on that machine that have much higher permissions. Like a really popular thing for a long time was, I just make the SCCM and SCOM accounts domain admins, and they can do everything. The problem is if you're using the same SCCM and SCOM account on your workstations, your servers, and your DCs, well, you pop any one of those machines, and now you're a domain admin. And orgs have gotten better about isolating those, but still, more often than not, we see domain admins using the same desktop they use for productivity as for their domain administrative tasks. And if one of their
Absolutely.
machines gets compromised, that's game over for the org, right? Threat actors are going to get in, they're going to establish persistence. You're not going to find them for average of 5 to 6 months. That's how long it takes average company to discover a threat actor in their environment. And you're going to have a bad time because they're getting more patient. Threat actors more often than not aren't doing what they did at MGM, where it was a fast kind of smash and grab. They're planning and they're even infiltrating backups. So if you have a backup, great. That's not 100% proof for ransomware because if threat actors know you have good backups, they're going to linger as long as they can, corrupt your backups. So even if you restore from backup, your stuff is still ransomed. So it's not a surefire defense.
Wow. That's what you just described is ubiquitous. I hate to say it in the industry though.
Yeah, it's everywhere. There's very few
It's
orgs that have
everywhere.
gone and actually separated their domain admins with separate workstations or PAW or SAW or something like that. And the thing we're telling orgs is like, look, you don't need a PAW or SAW for everyone in the org. You just need it for your tier 0, your domain admins, your enterprise admins, and increasingly your network admins, right? Because threat actors are going after network devices. So getting those users also on a PAW or SAW is really going to help fortify your environment without a ton of extra cost. Like even if you don't do like a Bastion Forest or something like that, if you do interforest tiering by isolating those domain admins and other tier 0 admins off to the side
Yep.
with their own workstations and laptops to perform their tier 0 activities, and then prevent those tier 0 IDs from logging into regular desktops and regular servers, you've already gained a lot of security with no subscription, no software. It's just technical controls you've implemented to help secure your org. And that's something SMBs can do, but there's not a clear instruction guide on how to do that from Microsoft, right? This is something you kind of have to get in and figure out yourself. There's not like a step-by-step article out there for this.
For some of the folks who may be listening who are not super technical, why do we still have AD? Let me back up to that. What's the
Well,
reason for it?
there's really no replacement for it if you're a large organization. Now, there's some orgs have homebrewed their own, right? Like Google and Apple. Obviously, they're not big Microsoft shops, right? But for anyone that's been around, it's a requirement because you started using it in 2000, especially for these large orgs, and you've been using it ever since. And once you start and you have everything running off AD, your auth is going through it, all your applications are going through it. It's hard to uproot that and just put it somewhere else. Lululemon tried this, and they're a relatively newer company. They tried to move 100% cloud native. They got like 90, 95% of the way, and then 5 to 10% of their infrastructure has to stay in the data center because there was app compatibility that they needed for their business that they just couldn't get 100% away from. And that's the kind of thing that still gets people. It's very hard to be 100% cloud native unless you started 100% cloud native. So we're seeing more newer SMBs just do 100% cloud, whether it's Google or Microsoft or Amazon, whatever your favorite flavor is.
But does that still solve your AD problems?
Uh, yes and no. So for a lot of these cloud providers, they have their variant of identity, right? So Microsoft has Entra, and that's you
Yep.
can kind of look at that as Active Directory for Azure, but it's really not a full Active Directory suite. It'll handle creation and removal of identities, but anything you were doing on-prem with application tie-ins or auth, anything that's AD compatible is not really going to work with Entra. So they're two different technology stacks, and there's similar variants to Entra on Google and AWS. Um, it's not really the same. You can throw an Active Directory server out in the cloud and still have Active Directory, but there's not really any native cloud replacement for AD.
What about I'll ask the dumb question here, like these identity providers like Universal Directory from Okta, does that
Uh,
play a role in? Yeah,
well,
please. Love
beyond
it.
the black eyes that Okta already has right now from a security standpoint, the
Right.
problem with creating a secondary store of identities from a security standpoint is now you have an additional door on your house that someone can break in. If you have Active Directory and that's your only identity store, you only have one door, so you can fortify the crap out of that door. You can put deadlocks on it, put a camera, peephole, deadbolts, steel door, whatever. And then you bolt Okta on the side, and it's your back door made out of balsa wood with no lock on it. Not great. And even if it does get better with time, it's not going to be as solid as the existing solutions from a security standpoint. Just because raw development and experience. Look how much development time, hours, and money Microsoft has been putting into Active Directory over the years. Now, how much has Okta, a company of not even a fraction of the size of Microsoft, put into their security stack? It's not going to be as strong of a door.
Well, but the Microsoft door, you have to configure properly, as you mentioned, right?
Yes, you do have to
Right.
configure it properly.
Otherwise, so so give us some tips. You already told us about a few things that foundationally you would say this is hygiene 101, AD 101 that you should be doing. If whether you're in
Regular
the
password
cloud or
audits. Yeah. Audit your
yeah,
passwords 100%. So there's password lists that threat actors will use. One of the most common password attacks right now is called password spraying. Threat actors will take the most common passwords that exist and just hit every account in your org, once with it, try and get that password to work. And then they'll wait a little bit, do another round and another round, and that's not going to set off as many alarms, right? Because all of our alarms are set to recognize, hey, someone's trying thousands of passwords on account B. Let's
right.
lock it out. Okay, we got that. But password spraying kind of flies under the radar because they try these common passwords that meet current security compliance policies that are still very, very weak. And these are all well-known passwords that sit in dictionaries that anyone, one of these orgs can grab and do a cross-reference. And that's what I would really encourage doing. Like cross-reference your existing passwords with one of these password spray or these RockU password tables that threat actors are using. And if you show users that are popping up with these well-known passwords, change them, right? And it's tough for SMBs to kind of like devote time and resources to doing this. But even doing this once every 6 months is going to have a lot of value for an org. And it's also going to tell you if your system admins are using the same password for their productivity account as they are for their administrative account, assuming they have two.
Likely they are.
Yeah, I mean, path of least resistance. This is
It's
what
just
humans do.
it's human nature, right? I mean, it's not that they're doing there's no malicious intent on their part. It's like it's the path of least resistance, right? It's one more password to remember, right?
Yep, and
So do password
it's tough.
audits.
Yeah, definitely password audits. Meet your compliance standards. CIS is for SMBs at least. It's a good way to get most of the way there, and then beyond that, just intelligent network designs. You don't open external management if you don't absolutely need to. We've been seeing a lot of network devices being popped lately because they have external administrative access and there's some sort of vulnerability with the software, whether it's Cisco or some sort of firewall, Citrix. If you don't have to have that administrative portal open, don't open it. Use it internally, and that's going to buy you a lot of security, right? Just right there, because you don't have that admin portal facing externally. So if there is a vulnerability, you're protected from it because you don't have those ports open.
What about we talked briefly about escalation of privileges, but it happens. I'll give you a simple use case. A lot of times under security policies, admins will block users from installing software or updating software, okay, which is controversial too, because that's a double-edged sword, but we'll go away from that for just a second, right? Because you end up with a whole bunch of unpatched systems, but that's besides the point. Sometimes you see that they call their help desk and they yell at them, and then the help desk says, you know what, fine, we'll enable you to, there's this program that you got to have because you do a specific function and it's unique. Yep. And whatever the reason, they let you install it, but they never take away that privilege, right? So
permission creep.
So now that user is out there and they've got administrative privileges, and then that gets used.
So there's a few different ways to kind of tackle that specific issue. You can have your help desk staff install the application for them via some sort of remote management software, right? That's an option. You can temporarily make that user an administrator with a timeout effectively. So there's a lot of ways you can kind of dev this internally. You don't need CyberArk or any other expensive software suite for that. You can write it in-house with PowerShell, as long as the infrastructure's already been prepped. One thing we like to do is we like to manage our workstation administrative groups and our server administrative groups with group policy preferences. This is all built into Windows, and it has wildcard environmental variables that you can leverage. And what I mean by wildcards is, let's look at our desktops. So you could have the group right in your policy, you do desktop % computer name % admins. So that one gets thrown into your local admins group on the desktop. And then you also put desktop dash admins, global admins. Okay. So that one gets put in there as well. So now you have a global admin. So anyone that's a member of this can manage all the desktops. And then you have a one-to-one. You actually have a specific Active Directory security group that sits out there for each one of your desktops. And now when Bob or Judy calls in and says, hey, I need to be an admin on my machine, I have to install this software, we're going to miss this big timeline, whatever, you can pop their account into that group temporally. Say, all right, Bob, now you're an admin for the next 4 hours, install whatever you need to, and then you can have PowerShell just time it out and pull it out of the group, or lots of different kind of methodologies to do that. But that gives you the ability to actually push that out and manage it via PowerShell and Active Directory instead of on the local machine where things often get forgotten.
how do you do that when a lot of people don't even know what all their compute assets are? I mean,
Oh
that's a
gosh, yeah,
foundational problem.
yeah. It's worse for SMBs too because they move fast, they grow fast, and asset inventory isn't always at the top of the list for things they should be doing. You'll find machines that aren't even domain joined, right? They're just, hey, I spun up this machine so I can start doing this task, and it's not a part of the domain. It sits off to the side, but I need to do this thing on it. And the IT department might not even know about it. So that's asset inventory is pretty important, and especially as you grow. You start doing a good job of it when you're small. As you grow, that's going to really pay dividends. And as far as the discovery side there, network should be able to help you discover all those machines. Look at all the MAC addresses. You can cross-reference those to the vendor that the MAC address belongs to, cross-reference those to IPs, what location they sit in. And that's a good start if you're not going to buy a solution that already does inventory.
So I'll tell you, we many years ago we used to do Tanium work. Okay,
Ah, yeah,
and of course it's technology for a megacorp, right? It's not for an SMB play, but
it's built for enterprise. Yeah.
yeah, in the enterprise space, we would still find that what they thought they had versus what the technology found, the number was always 10 to 15% higher.
Yeah,
Even
it, it
in
gets it gets really murky, especially if you have like a creative department and they're all running non-Windows machines, right? They're running Apple machines, or maybe your security team is running a bunch of Linux
yeah,
machines, and now those aren't always directly exposed to the domain. So from an AD standpoint, they don't exist. They'll still exist on the network side. Network will still know about them, but AD will not know they exist. That's why I really like running inventory from a networking perspective and not so much from an agent perspective, because network's going to see everything. Active Directory or a specific agent's only going to see things that it's been exposed to.
that's very true. That's very true. And you're right, there's a lot of mixed environments. Even in small businesses, there's mixed environments. There's people who are running Macs, or there's Linux boxes, or what have you, or you got Android devices sitting out there,
Yeah, yeah.
all kinds of stuff that's on your network. Not that I have anything against Android, it's just an example that came out. It's a real mixed bag, and getting a handle on that inventory is a problem, um, to begin with. What
Well, because
what do
if
you
you
do?
don't you
Like,
don't find it, the threat actors will. Um, Use case here, the Ubisoft hack, right? Threat
yeah,
actors sat in their environment, looked at Jira documents, networking designs, all the documentation that company had. They ingested all of it and learned the network better than the people running the network, found the weaknesses and exploited them. But they were in there, over 6 months, just doing discovery and learning about this environment before they executed their payloads. And they
which
made
again,
sure to do a good job so that they didn't get caught, because they were doing a lot of monitoring in the Ubisoft network. They were looking for LLMNR and password hash manipulation, all the common stuff. And the threat actors found a vulnerability they weren't looking for and exploited it, via assets that weren't known. So inventorying is very important from a security standpoint.
now, why would they not have geofenced their identities? That's another
Well,
question. So when you're logging, why is
geofencing is it's tough for global companies, right? Because you can't just say, hey, don't let anyone in from Europe if you have a presence in Europe. So now you can get more granular, right, at a per country level. But even that's kind of difficult to maintain and not 100% effective, right? Because you can easily have a machine that a threat actor is using from that region that's been compromised. Now, it will show up as a new IP address. So if you get granular to the level of, hey, you can only do your administrative work from this specific IP address, that's effective from a networking control for sure. But it's also very expensive to maintain at scale, because dev goes from their home to another location and, hey, I can't do my work anymore. Hey, I can't do this anymore. I can't do that anymore. they have to call into the help desk and get a new IP added, and they're never going to use that IP again because it was their aunt's house or something, right? So it's hard to maintain at scale. You can definitely do a lot of geofencing, and depending on what your org does and where they do it, there's definitely a lot of benefits there, but it's not a silver bullet.
Thanks for stating that. You made the point that I was going to go after. It's not the silver bullet. It has value as long as you understand the context in which it is deployed and understand what the limitation behind it is. Because often it's marketed as, well, will if you have adaptive MFA, then you're golden. You're much better, but you're not golden.
Yeah, much better. That's what I would say. It is significantly improved, but not bulletproof.
But you're not bulletproof. Yeah. Well, nothing really is. I would venture to say, James, I mean, you've been in this business for a long time. Will we ever really get to a system that cannot be hacked? Unless it
even air gap systems have vulnerabilities, and these have been known for quite a while, actually, since but before me, right? So air gapping systems, you have to control any electronic emissions. Think about when you're typing on a keyboard. Each key makes a distinct sound for that location and that user in that room. And if you had a sound device hooked up to that room and you're performing listening, you can, with relatively good accuracy, determine which keystrokes are being entered. And beyond that, electronic emissions from the computer itself. I had a case in the probably early 2000s that was an old DoD case from like the 80s or 90s. I don't remember exactly, but it had electronic EMF shielding all around the external of the case to control electronic emissions, so no one could point a device at the case and try and figure out what you're doing from a processing standpoint. So even air gap systems have their vulnerabilities, albeit real edge case stuff.
Well, I mean, I always bring it up on this show. That's how we compromised the Iranian centrifuges, right? That was Operation Nitro Zeus, right? That was the whole
was air
thing
gapped.
There. Yep. That was completely air gapped but again, it's a great example of human greed. Yeah. They dropped USB devices. That's what they were hoping. They left freebie USB devices at local haunts.
Well, there's some new data that's coming out that actually pointed to a Dutch double agent for this, and the USB drops were just the story to give this person some cover. This has been published relatively recently, I think past couple weeks, but basically they tracked it down to this individual who smuggled in a USB system using some of the water input for the environment. So they floated the USB in because they get searched when they're at the door. And then he picked it up internally, plugged it in, and his job is done. And then they did the cover story for dropping USB in public areas to kind of remove some of the heat from that individual.
That's
fascinating, right?
Well, that's fascinating. Well, we've had a couple. We had just a couple weeks ago. We had a human targeter on who worked for the Navy, and that was her job. Was to target people and figure out how they can be compromised. We've had a real CIA agent on the show, and he says compromising people is actually pretty straightforward if you know how to go about practicing your craft.
It's all about the data sets you have. This is something that the CCP's been doing to the U.S. at scale, harvesting our financial data, harvesting our health data, debts, all these kind of things. And they're looking for people that already work within the government, that have a lot of debt, that maybe become disillusioned with the US for one reason or another. And they might be looking at an individual whose wife or husband has cancer and they've, second mortgage on their house, they spend everything on this treatment and they're just scraping by, and this person is clearance. Well, that's a target, right? That's someone who did everything right and they're losing, and they might not be very patriotic at that point in their lives, and they're a target. And if you have a large enough data set, you can identify lots of targets fairly quickly.
Oh, yeah. And then, it gets back to human behavior again, right? So if you have deadbolts and everything on your door, that's great. But what if I just unlock all that stuff?
Well, yeah, threat actors are starting to target users at home, right? Because we have a lot of people working remotely, right? More than we probably have at any other point in history. And the corporate network might be very well fortified, but this user sitting on their home network, they have SMB exposed, they're with their family, a bunch of people downloading things, going out the internet, and they're on that same subnet. And the machine they're using might even be a personal machine, might be just some Windows machine that doesn't really have any rigorous security controls. But even if it's a
Yep.
corporate asset with good security controls, if you compromise the network, before that machine connects to the VPN, it's vulnerable. And we're seeing more sophisticated threat actors that are doing specific targeting attacks, starting at the home and then infiltrating into the enterprise from there.
And you know what? This trend is here to stay. So,
Absolutely.
uh, so we need to solve it. Another thing that another thing that we haven't solved yet is this whole thing of mergers and acquisitions. When you look at
Oof.
companies that grow, you acquire a firm, you might have great security controls, but the guys you acquired sucked, and now
Yeah.
they're part of your domain.
M&A and divestitures have been huge the past 2 years, just like they were after '08 and '01. You get a lot of smaller companies getting bought up, and you get larger companies that are publicly traded, and shareholders are saying, "Hey, sell this profitable area. The stock's not doing well. You need to make some money, and because of that, you need to sell this arm." So there's a lot of M&A and divestitures that are happening right now, and you hit the head on the nail right there, rather perfectly. The smaller orgs often do not have the same security presence as the larger org that's consuming them. And when you bring that environment into yours, you're presenting a fair amount of risk. And one of the most common things will happen is, hey, let's just snapshot their AD and bring it over, and then we'll start kind of merging
Oh,
everything
that
over.
is a bad idea, man.
Yeah, it happens. It happens so much. You just get a complete snapshot of the DIT. It gets moved over, and then everything that was bad before gets brought into that new environment.
Oh,
So it's not something I advise people to do, but it's the path of least resistance. It gets them up and running as quickly as possible. So there's a lot of non-security oriented, M&A firms or divestiture firms that will do this. They're very good at merging identities and getting everything migrated, but they don't always put security at the forefront because it's an added cost, right? So you see a lot of vendors, even vendors that are releasing the software themselves, kind of cutting corners here from the security side of things.
and this happens in really large companies too. You get a lot of big companies that acquire the innovative player, right, in the space. They may be the small company, and they're extremely good at whatever widget they're making, whatever that is, right? But
Yeah, yeah,
security on their network and was not their thing. And
yeah,
now the
they're
big
they're widget
companies,
makers. Yeah, they're widget makers. They're not security people. Like, why do we need to do security? We're making widgets. Real
hey,
common problem. And there's another flag that'll get turned on here too, which is SSID history or SID history, and that allows basically you to mimic different IDs. And it's handy when you're performing a migration, but a lot of times post migration, those flags will get left on, and that's a great tool for threat actors because now they can leverage that and they can pretend to be kind of whoever they want in their org while not appearing to be that individual. So definitely, go turn your SID history off when you're done with migrations, everyone. Pretty common baseline kind of thing, but just keep an eyeball on that.
that great advice. Before we run out of time here, James, I wanted you to talk a little bit about DSE.
Oh,
What does your company do?
I guess I should talk about my company,
What are you?
shouldn't I?
Yeah, I want you to plug your company here. Tell us about your work and what you guys are up to.
Well, DSE is an Active Directory focused security firm. As I mentioned, we do M&A and divestiture work, but the meat and potatoes of what we do is Active Directory security. A lot of companies will do like an 80 wrap and push CIS compliance out, and then, hey, we're good, we're fine. There's no other vulnerabilities in our Active Directory, but there inevitably are. So we use a lot of the same tools that threat actors leverage, right? Threat actors use Bloodhound to poke around and perform discovery. We use the enterprise variant of that, which is much more powerful. and we do the same type of methodological discovery that threat actors will do. So whatever the bad guys are doing, we're mimicking it as close as we can, staying on top of their methodologies and attack paths, so we can help these larger organizations, not show up in the news. That's our goal. Make sure the CISO stays the CISO for as long as they want, and no publicity in the news.
That's a tough job, man. I wouldn't be taking bets on that. That's like that's the shortest lived position in a company, right? I mean, you look at
And
the average
that's
CISO life.
Yeah, and that's a shame too, because once a security event happens at a company, the CISO is the ablative armor for the CIO, right? The CISO
Right.
gets let go, and now they have this black stain on their career because, hey, they were at company X when they got hacked. Well, we don't want that CISO; they did a bad job. But my perspective on that is that CISO saw what can happen and how quickly it can happen. In my opinion, they're more valuable because of that exposure, right? They're going to give you a more realistic view of risk because they've been through it, and that carries a lot of weight.
We've had people also say about, moving the CISO's office out from under the CIO, which I'm personally a big fan of, right? Because there's a
Yeah,
conflict of interest there.
it's also money, right? And I think we're going to see a lot of changes. I haven't seen the latest developments on the SEC versus the SolarWinds CISO, but basically they're publicly traded. The CISO knew about vulnerabilities allegedly and didn't bubble those up to the CIO, so they didn't show up on the quarterly reports, and investors got hurt. Now, for publicly traded companies that have a CISO, all the CISOs are looking at that case. They want to know what's going to happen, because if they're personally liable for not bubbling something up to the CIO, then a lot more traffic is going to come into those CIOs. They're going to get a whole lot of data from those CISOs now, because the CISOs don't want to be personally liable for it, misleading shareholders. And then the CIO is going to have to take this data, figure out what bubbles up to the CEO and what bubbles up to the quarterly reports and what doesn't. So it's a shift in responsibility in my viewpoint.
Yeah, well, take the CISO out from under the CIO and make him directly responsible to the board for security risks, right? And
Yeah, that would change the landscape dramatically for the better. It'll create a lot more work short term, but long term it'll be a better security footprint for everybody.
hey, so James, you should write a book. You, I, you
I
know,
appreciate that.
yeah, you have a lot of knowledge here, and we're just scratching the surface of this in 45 minutes or so. Um, we'd love to, if you're open to it, get you back and talk about some of the things that you have seen that have gone wrong. These real world use cases and real world examples, I think, is what makes cybersecurity tangible, and we don't talk about them enough. You brought up
I'd be
some
happy
really
to
good
be
ones.
back and talk about it.
Do you have any? Are you doing any talks? Are you speaking at any events? Anything coming
I'm
up that you want
just
everybody to know about?
I'm actually just recovering from surgery. I was supposed to speak at some conferences in the southeast that I couldn't make. The kind of usual gambit of B-sides, black hat talks that I'm hoping get accepted this year, so I can speak a little bit about Active Directory and security and some basically free ways to harden your Active Directory environment without buying any software or anything. It's just configuration, as we talked about, right? If you put these configurations in, you're going to be more secure. And it's kind of a boring topic, but I'm hoping there's a big enough audience at Black Hat to recognize the value there. So look out for me,
I
of
think
course,
in
at Black
Black
Hat.
Hat there will be.
Yeah, yeah. They get a lot of competition. They have about a 10% acceptance rate for talks. So they'll get 1,000 and only 100, get through. So it's competitive to get in there. Yeah, they like the new cutting edge vulnerabilities and stuff. For me, it's just baseline security, and what you can do better seems more impactful, because the big vulnerabilities always get patched fairly quickly. And as long as you're patching, you're all right there.
Yeah,
But the foundational
that's
stuff
another
is the
topic
real issue. Oh yeah, we could talk for hours about patching.
about that, right? But it's still the basics we're not getting right, and I think having that discussion on what all the vulnerabilities are, things that you see, especially making it tangible, like real life stories of what's happened. Um, I think that might make cybersecurity more tangible. And I think if even a couple people listen to your advice, you did the world a favor. Now, how do they get a hold of you? How do they get a hold of your company?
Oh, well, I mean, you can pop out to our website. It's DSE.team. We're still saving up for that .com. It's a little on the spendy side since it's a 3-letter. And you can always reach out to us. We have contact information out there. You can call us, email us, kind of, whatever you want to do. And we're happy to help. Even if you just have some questions and are looking for answers, we don't mind. Just give us a ring, shoot us an email. We'll give you some advice.
Well, James, thank you so much. We'll put the links in the show notes, and really appreciate you being here. Good stuff.
Oh, yeah. Happy to be here, man. Thank you.